All right. Well, welcome. I'm Melody Sky Weaver. I have the incredible honor of being the library director for the City of Port Townsend Public Library, and I'm thrilled on this solstice eve to be able to share my Great Swedish Adventure with you all. And before I begin, I had a couple of announcements. We are recording tonight, and it'll be posted to the library's event page, the calendar page for this event in the next couple of days if there's anyone who couldn't make it and you want to share it. Also, tomorrow, Thursday, December 21st, is the solstice. It's also the Friends of the Library special pop up book sale. They make almost all of our incredible library programs possible through their hard work. So their sale will be from 12:30 to 4:30 tomorrow in the Pink House, which is the Blue House right by the library. I did turn on closed captioning for this program, so you can turn on closed captioning if you would like to have that. And we will have time for questions and answers at the end. So if you have questions, you can put them in the chat or we'll open it up for discussion at the end. We won't record the questions and answers, but it will be available. So without further ado, I had the incredible opportunity to go to Sweden during a pandemic to trace my family roots. And I'm excited to be able to tell you all the story. And I want to begin with just some incredible gratitude to the city of Port Townsend. When I went for this incredible opportunity, I was so thankful that the city said yes, that I might possibly be away for 6 weeks in Sweden, and the incredible library staff who took care of the library while I was gone and who make the library magical every day. And of course, for all my friends and family who supported this really incredible journey. And I think there are some maybe other cast members that are attending tonight. So I wanted to thank them too. It's really incredible to be part of this family of, I believe, now 111 people who have been a part of this show. So I have known that I was of Swedish descent on my mom's side ever since I was a little girl, and I loved all things Sweden, including Kirsten, who was the Swedish American Girl doll. I wanted to dress up like Saint Lucia. That was, I think, Saint Lucia Day was December 13th of this month. I asked for Swedish tapes for Christmas. I thought I'd teach myself Swedish, and my granddaddy, my mom's father, regaled me and my younger brothers with stories that we were descended from Swedish nobility or royalty. He was a great storyteller and had grown up in as East Coast royalty in the Waldorf Astoria. His father was the vice president of the Waldorf and was responsible for moving the Waldorf Astoria to its new location when they built the Empire State Building. So my granddaddy lived a very incredible life and loved to tell tall tales. So we never totally knew if the stories of our noble ancestry was true or not, but they were wonderful stories to think about as children. And my mom makes the most amazing Swedish crepes. And I don't really look Swedish, but my mom looks like Galadriel from Lord of the Rings. So you'd take a look at her and you would say, oh, definitely Swedish. So I had some friends a few years ago tell me about this show that takes place in Sweden that had been going at that point, I think, for 8 years, called Allt för Sverige, which means everything for Sweden. And it is one of the most popular shows in Sweden. The premise is they take 10 Americans every year who haven't been to Sweden, who can prove that they are of Swedish descent, who have living family in Sweden. And of course, I think the unwritten thing is that they have a really interesting story and they have a big personality because Swedes love to watch the show. Sweden is a country of about 10 million people, and when this show airs, about 5 million people watch the show. It's also won Emmy Awards. It's incredible. And in America, we call it the Great Swedish Adventure. And Anders Lunden is the beloved host. He's kind of like the Mr. Rogers slash LeVar Burton of Sweden. A lot of people grew up watching him do kids shows. But I never heard of this show before. And my friends that told me about it were very introverted, and they were also of Swedish descent, and they said they could never be on the show. They were too shy, but I should be on the show because I'm a loud librarian, which I thought was quite delightful. So I watched the show, I did research, and then, one thing I haven't really done in my career as a librarian is genealogy. That's a really specialized area of research, and I had heard from some people who had been on the show that if you wanted to have a good chance of applying to go, you should do some genealogical research and know more about your family. So I went to the library. I actually went into the Paulsbo Library in Kitsap in Little Norway, where I live, and within 15 minutes, I was able to find my great grandparents' information from the census records, when they immigrated, their names, even their handwriting on the census records, which was really incredible. So when I went to apply to be on this show, I was able to say that I at least knew more about my great grandparents. I knew when they came to America, and I thought they came when they were newly married. There were about 3 million Swedes that immigrated in the late 1800s to the 1900s, and now there's about 45 million people in the US that are of Swedish descent. So I at least knew when my family came over, but I didn't know anything before or what their lives were like. And when I told my friends that my family was likely noble, they looked at me like, that's ridiculous. And they said half the people who go on the show say that they're from royalty or nobility. So probably not true. So this is me applying to be on the show. I had to fill out a huge application. I had to take photographs. I had to send in a little video, and my husband very kindly filmed the video around Paulsbo, which was fun because there's Viking sculptures and murals of shield maidens. And I applied in 2018, and I got to interview with a casting agent via Skype, which was really fun. And they let me know that if I heard back in a couple of weeks, I'd be flown to Hollywood for an in-person casting call, which is all very exciting. I didn't hear back. So they said, you know, about half the people that go on the show are picked the first time they apply, and the other half are persistent, and I should apply again. So I was getting ready to apply again in late 2019, and they contacted me. I did another cast interview. I think they really loved that I talked about being a loud librarian. And then they flew me out to Hollywood in February 2020. Insert ominous music now. Dun, dun, dun. So I went out to Hollywood for a day trip. I left at like 6 in the morning from SeaTac and got back at midnight. And we did the casting call at the Sunset Marquis, which is a famous hotel. The Doors used to play there. Got to go to Mel's Drive-In and meet with the Swedish casting agents and tell my story, which of course they all laughed. And I said, my granddaddy said we were descended from nobility. And they're like, half the people think that. You're probably not. Most likely your family were peasants. I had a really good feeling that I got cast on the show, but I didn't know for sure. And then I found out in February 2020 that I had been cast on the show. And of course, we all know what happened in March 2020 when the whole world shut down. So the show was supposed to film, it always films in May and June, and it goes over midsummer. And they pushed it back to August, thinking that that little pandemic thing, COVID, whatever that was, wouldn't last very long. So we were on a little hiatus. And then, of course, as COVID ramped up and we learned more about what was happening with that, the show was postponed indefinitely. And Sweden had a different way of handling the pandemic than other Scandinavian countries. So the show was on hold indefinitely, but they kept being hopeful, and the casting agents kept contacting me, and the rest of the cast, which I had no idea who else had been cast on the show. It was also very secret. We couldn't post anything to social media. We could tell our workplace and our family, but really had to keep it as confidential as possible. And because I'm doing this now, I wanted you all to know that they are casting for season 12. So Keith is going to put in the chat the link to the website, the Great Swedish Adventure, where that's where you can go to apply. And I think they're looking for people ages 19 to 70. It's a life-changing, incredible experience. So look into that more and share with friends and family who might be interested in being a part of the show. So we waited until August of 2021 to film this show. So over a year it was delayed, and miraculously all of the people that had been cast were able to go. When you commit to be on the show, you have to commit to being gone for 6 weeks. So I thought And it was interesting when we did this, you had to commit to being gone for 6 weeks, but you could be gone for a week if you get kicked off first because it is a competitive show, or you could potentially be there 6 weeks if you win. And they do these like little carnivalesque competitions to slowly send people home. And unlike American reality television, what's really incredible about this show is you don't win like $1 million you typically do in American reality. You win a family reunion with all your living Swedish relatives. So as the show has been researching all of the cast, they've been finding all of the cast's living relatives and getting them basically to be on call if they're going to come for this big uh, party at the end for the winner, which is pretty special. And you think about it, at this time being in a pandemic and not being able to travel, especially in the early days, not being able to necessarily connect with friends and family, it made going to Sweden and connecting with family that much more incredible. And I think we were that much more grateful for the experience. So this was the cast photo that we took right before we hopped on a ship to sail to Sweden because we hung out for a couple of days. They called it a mini quarantine when we landed. We landed in Denmark and sailed to Helsingborg. And I knew that these were people that I would hopefully be in contact with the rest of my life. So before I left, I went and got some little gifts that were easy to travel with from Paul's boat to take. So I brought some runes, a Viking cat, and then a fun little keychain that I know some of the cast still have. But it was nice to just be able to share that because these are my people in a way. Like I met people that had also always dreamed of going to Sweden and did things like ask for Swedish language tapes for Christmas gifts. So pretty special when you meet your people who have similar interests. And we all have a variety of backgrounds, which I'll talk about more as I tell you about the filming. This was our official cast photo, and we were split into two teams. Not my favorite part of the show. I think the show doesn't need the competition, but that's what they do. They have the grand prize of the winner getting a family reunion, and I won't give any spoilers because later on you all will get a link if you want to be able to see all 10 seasons of the show. I was on season 10, which is a big deal. Season 10 that got delayed for over a year. So there's my incredible team with the hosts. This was another official cast photo. And that was my official headshot. And it was fun. They told us when we were packing, and they didn't give us a lot of information. So it was, really interesting to try and figure out how to plan to be in Sweden for 6 weeks, not knowing where we'd be. We had to sign like a 20-page non-disclosure agreement. But one of the things they said was to bring something that was like an icon that really signified who we were. So some people brought like a camera or a guitar, and I brought a book. Being a librarian, I brought A Wrinkle in Time, which is one of my favorite books of all time. I reread it every 10 years by Madeline Engel, and I brought that book with me, and they cropped it out of the photo. But I wanted you all to know that's what I was holding when they took this photo. When we started filming, one of the things we had to do was give over our cell phones. So we really didn't have any contact with the outside world. We were filming sometimes 12-hour days. And this was the first day when we arrived in Sweden. And it was a big deal to be filming in August because the show had always been in June, primarily, a little bit of May into June to celebrate midsummer. But now we were in August, and we sailed into Helsingborg, which was a city that a lot of immigrants had left. And as a matter of fact, Erica, one of the cast members, her family had immigrated from Helsingborg. And in this episode, we learned about Sommarstugas, which is the Swedish summer house, and how sacred summer is. And we got to learn about some summer songs, and we got to have fika, which I will tell you about. So as soon as we landed, being silly Americans, we all took off our shoes and ran over to a tree and put our feet in Swedish soil. Because how cool that for many of us, we were the first ones, the first descendants of our family to come back to the motherland, which is pretty special. So we got to go stay at Lake Vänern, which is the third biggest lake in Sweden, or it's the third biggest lake in Europe and the biggest lake in Sweden. We stayed at summer stugas and got to interact with Swedish locals. And when we landed, we were swarmed with press. And when we went and put our feet in the soil, that was on the cover of a bunch of Swedish newspapers the next day. So it was very strange. They were sending out all these press releases about us, and people were recognizing us and coming up and asking for autographs, which I think is a very un-Swedish thing. But they were just excited that the Americans were back after a bit of a hiatus. And it was interesting filming a reality show, because a reality TV show is not a documentary. So we did spend a lot of time getting the perfect shot. So if you've seen the show, or when you look forward to seeing the show, it's beautifully filmed. Just an incredible show. There's a reason it wins Emmys, but sometimes we would walk in and out of a room 10 times to get the wide angle lens and to get the close up. And so it wasn't always as exciting as it was cracked up to be, because we would have to keep repeating the scene to get the perfect shot. This is me and Sharon, who's become a dear friend. Very lovely. Us enjoying our Swedish summer at the beautiful lake. And then that's Anders, the host. He had us sing some Swedish songs, which was very fun. I wanted to talk about some of the books we have in our library collection, because there's been an explosion of books around how incredible Scandinavia is, and that when you look, the World Happiness Index, Scandinavian countries are frequently listed as the happiest, healthiest countries in the world. So there's been a lot of books about different Scandinavian concepts talking about why that contributes to the society being so incredible. And this is a lovely little, the little book of fika, which I own, and we also have at the library. Fika means coffee in Swedish. It doesn't totally translate into English, but it essentially means a restorative break or restorative togetherness. So Swedes are probably some of the hardest working people that I've ever met, but they will take their time for their coffee break to be with friends and family, to have excellent coffee. My Swedish family, as a matter of fact, says they think our coffee is too watered down in America. And you have to have, of course, a lovely little pastry to go along with this. So this book is just very sweet. And then another book is Lagom, which we have in the library as well. And it loosely translates, again, it doesn't have a direct translation, to not too much and not too little. This is actually memorialized in the Swedish Constitution. It's a very, very important part of Swedish culture. And the legend of how Lagom got to be is that Vikings would sit around with their drinking horn, drinking mead, and they'd make sure that everyone had just enough mead, not too much, not too little. So I think it's a really fun concept and a lovely book. We have lots of great books about Scandinavian culture, so come check them out at the library. There's also another concept, I'm sure there's a book about it, but I was just really touched to learn about this when I was in Sweden, which is allemansratten. And you have to pardon me, my Swedish is not that great, so if I mispronounced it, just bear with me. But that is the right of public access. So you don't see things in Sweden like no trespassing, private property. The lands are open for everyone with some conditions. Of course, you need to leave no trace, but you can travel on different lands and camp and forage and explore. And I think it's just, the Swedish freedom to roam is a really wonderful concept, and they have some of the most pristine nature. So episode 2 was about the Swedish Bible Belt. Sweden is one of the most atheist countries in the world, even though people are born into the Lutheran Church. And they decided to do an episode about Swedish religion, which is interesting because they have a little Bible Belt, just like the US does, much smaller than the US. And they split the cast, so there were still 10 of us at this point. They split half to go to a Swedish camp, Bible camp, and then they split half of us to go and stay with Pastor Amos. And remember, I said we didn't have our phones. We would, at the beginning of every episode, we'd open what was called a koffer, which is like a big trunk that our family would have traveled with when they immigrated to the US, and we'd read a letter and talk about what we were going to do in the episode. So we didn't know who Pastor Amos was. We just knew, I think, that he had won like Man of the Year in Sweden and was very beloved. So, so fortunate. Me, Brittany in the orange dress, Erica in the blue dress, and John got to stay with Pastor Amos's family, and they opened up their hearts and their homes to us. And it was so incredible to have that special experience being new to Sweden, to stay with a family and get to know a community, because the church congregation came together with us. And we were in Sävsjö in Småland. That's where we went, which is where the Swedish Bible Belt is located. And we got to go to a church service that was in English and sing in the choir. And the family with their congregation held a wonderful barbecue for us. It was very fun. And we learned at the barbecue that a lot of people in Sweden have very similar names. So this little town gives everybody nicknames. And I just was so delighted by that. You can tell, if you know me, how much I love color and standing out. And so I asked some of the people at the dinner if perchance could I have a nickname? And they're like, I don't know, we need to know you for a long time. I'm not sure if we'll be able to come up with a nickname. And I said, okay, I understand. So at the end of the night, Frederick, one of the attendees, came up and he said, we have decided to nickname you Mellow after Eurovision. We think that suits your personality. And I was so honored. So that's my nickname. And Pastor Amos and his wife Karina and their daughters, Evelyn and Nicole, are like family to us. So I will talk about them again later in this talk, but it was just a really incredible experience. And I think one of the things too about being on the reality TV show is, each episode is about an hour. They have thousands of hours of film. There's only so much you can see, but some of the most special things that happened while being on this show weren't all filmed. Like me playing with the daughters or us gathering together. Part of the barbecue was filmed, but we talked for hours afterwards, and that wasn't out there. When the show aired, so we filmed in August, and the show ended up airing in January of 2022 and February of 2022. This show was considered very controversial. This episode, there were a lot of people who went to social media in Sweden and didn't like that the episode was about religion. I, however, thought that it was really nice that they showed this minority population in Sweden and gave them a chance. It was a big deal. Like the people that we met when we were in Safe Here were so honored to be a part of the show and to share their culture. And we're really proud of Pastor Amos. It's actually from Tanzania. So they were really proud to have this pastor from another country that had come to Sweden, and he married his wife Karina when she was a Swedish missionary. So I thought it was special to share that. It was interesting to see that not everybody was a fan of that episode. That episode also included a mini family reunion. So every cast member got to meet their family member for 2 minutes, which was unbelievable. To come all this way to Sweden, to finally be connected to the land, and to be hopeful of meeting family, and we got to meet them for 2 minutes. So I got to meet my cousin Lotta, and she presented me with this lovely cross stitch with my name on it. And I found out that my great-great-grandmother Augusta, who came to America and started the American line, Augusta's sister stayed behind, and Lotta is descended from her sister. But I knew instantly that I liked Lotta, and she told me lycka till, which means good luck, and you hold your thumbs in Sweden. Instead of crossing your fingers, you hold your thumbs in Sweden. So I was so hopeful that I would get to see her again, that I would win and get the family reunion. After the show aired, because Swedes, I think, are very good about following the rules, I did have family reach out to me via social media, so I am connected with more family now. So on the left is my cousin Teresa, who's an astrophysicist, and then on right is my cousin Marianne, who is a genealogist, who's been able to corroborate a lot of the genealogy that the show did. So I just scratched the surface when I went to the library to start doing research, but the show has a master genealogist, Frederick, who just is unbelievable in what he is able to find for the cast, which I will talk about a little bit later. So we did get days off while filming because the cast, the crew needed time off, and there was a crew of about 50 people for this show. And the first time we had a break, we got to go to Stockholm. That's where we always took our breaks. And the wonderful crew had put together directions for how to walk from the hotel and take the metro, which the Swedish metro is famous for some really great art. There's a whole Atlas Obscura article about the Swedish metro and their main library that was built in kind of an Egyptian style. But I got to go to the main library in Stockholm, and it was incredible. And when I let them know I was a librarian, they gave me a tour. So it was really beautiful. None of this was on film because this was a day off, but every time I go into a library, I always feel like I'm coming home. Also, got to go explore Gamla, which is the old town. You see that picture below is like one of the famous photographs you'll see of Stockholm. Stockholm is considered the Venice of the North. It's made up of 14 little islands in the archipelago, and it's beautiful city. I dreamed of seeing that city ever since I was a little girl, and I went to this incredible science fiction store, and I'm so glad I had my castmate sharing with me so that other people would believe this story. I went up and was talking to one of the people working at the register, and she asked me where I was from, and I said the Seattle area, and she goes, "Well, where are you really from?" And I said, "Well, I'm from Paulsbo." And she goes, "I love Paulsbo. I visit my cousin there every few years." And I was like, "Well, who's your cousin?" And she told me her cousin's name, and her cousin was one of the last people I hired at Kitsap Regional Library before I came to Port Townsend Public Library. So what a small world. And this was like total serendipity, had nothing to do with the show setup, but was really delightful. I love the serendipity that happens when you travel, and it's no 6 degrees of separation. It was like barely one. So the third episode, so now we've been in Sweden about 3 weeks. We traveled to Gotland, and they had just brought back Medieval Week, which happens in August. So again, it's fun that the show was filming in August for the first time, and they got to do different things. So there's the coffer, the trunk that we opened to find out what we're going to do in the show. That it was a 3-hour ferry ride to Gotland, and Gotland was like one of the richest, most powerful places in Scandinavia during the medieval ages. And we went to the city Visby, that's surrounded by a wall. Uh, and it was fun. I had a lawyer friend look at my non-disclosure agreement before I signed it, just to make sure, I wasn't giving away a first child or anything when I signed the agreement. And he said one of the things he pointed out to me is the show can tell you what to wear. And I was like, I'm okay with that. I don't have a problem with that. So of course, when we went to the medieval festival, we got special medieval clothing because we got to work at the festival. In the covert was also Beowulf. If you haven't read Beowulf, Seamus Heaney was a poet, probably wrote the best translation of Beowulf. It's interesting. It's the oldest epic poem in English, even though Beowulf actually took place in Sweden and believed to have taken place on Gotland. And there's an archaeologist who has some interesting theories about that I'll talk about a little bit. Something that is special about this show is that hopefully all of the cast, but not always, it depends how people get sent home with the competitions, get a special day. And the special day on this show is when you get taken to your ancestral home and you learn about your family from all the incredible research that Frederick the Master genealogist does. So on episode 3, which I think is the best episode, if you only want to watch one, because Medieval Week is so fun, the Beowulf theories are fascinating, and then it's my special day where I learn the truth about my family. Were they farmers? Was there nobility? Did my granddaddy tell the truth? Pretty exciting to learn about that. So we also would go to Swedish school. Every episode, Anders, who is an entertainer but also very much an educator, loves to talk about Sweden's culture and history as much for the Americans as for the Swedes themselves. So we went to a site that is believed by a contemporary Swedish archaeologist to be the site of Beowulf's house. This archaeologist has theorized that Beowulf was actually a real person, and that Grendel, who Beowulf fights, the monster in the story, was actually a word for starvation. So we went to this house ruins, and it was pretty fascinating learning about that. theory. And then you can also see us getting dressed up in medieval attire. We were in a 13th century church when we put on this attire to go work at the medieval festival, which was a lot of fun. I got to help people enter the festival and to tell them to spread medieval cheer and not COVID by standing 2 sheets width apart, which was very fun. I loved working at that festival. Something else that I did on the show, which is not actually on the show, but my time in Sweden, is I brought my rune stones, and these are actually a travel set of runes that I have. Runes are the ancient Viking language. There's also some belief that they're used for fortune telling. So historically, they were the Viking language. From the Nordic mythology, Odin gave up an eye and hung from a tree for 9 days to get the runes to be able to learn the future and if Ragnarok was coming. So I have a set of rune stones made from applewood that I bought, and I've been reading the runes since I was a teenager, just fascinated with everything Nordic. I love Nordic mythology. I've read a lot of sagas. And so this was special. Before we even started filming, I read all of the cast's runes. It's just something special to share with this incredible group of people. And then when we went to the medieval festival, we got to camp with a group of medievalists. And that night I stayed up late singing fun songs with the medievalists and reading everybody's fortune. So I got to be the resident fortune teller. Again, like some of the most special things on the show weren't actually on the show. I also visited the incredible historical museum on Gotland, which is famous for having a lot of the rune stones that we've seen in history books. So to see them, to dream of seeing them for a long time was pretty incredible to see them in person. So this is some of the stories. This is how we know a lot about Viking mythology, and also from the Eddas and the sagas. This is part of Visby's wall that surrounds the ancient medieval city, and they have this incredible medieval show, and that is a female jouster at night, which is pretty exciting to see. This was some of the media that was going around while we were in Sweden and after we filmed the show. So again, I said, like, this show is very popular in Sweden. It's funny to be a minor celebrity in a smaller country, but the show was very popular. So we had a lot of great articles written about us while we were gone and when we came back. And you can see this article was about my special day and what I discovered about my family. It was on the cover of the paper. So then we come to my special day, and my family was from Stockholm and Östergötland. So this is the area of Sweden that my family is from. And so I was taken away from the rest of the cast, and it was actually, I won't spend too much time on this because I didn't love this part of the show, but I was the first one off, so I didn't win, but I won't give you any more spoilers about the show, but I still got to be in Sweden for 3 weeks, which I'm incredibly grateful for. And I got my special day and got to learn about my family. And the special day happened to be my birthday. This is the Swedish birthday song. And when you're in Sweden and you tell somebody it's your birthday, they tell you in English, congratulations, which is fun. And the Swedish birthday song is basically, it tells you, may you live 100 years and then die. May you live 100 years and then die. And the Swedish cake, that's very special cake to have. And we had this when we did fika on the show when we filmed it, is the princess torta. So it's a picture of the torta. Very special traditions. So here I am on my special day, and we drove up to this big barn and a dairy farm, Hersader dairy farm. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess everybody was probably right. Like, my family wasn't noble, they were farmers. I mean, that's most likely what your family is going to be. And they had asked me earlier in the show when I was doing what's called a sync, and syncs are the little interviews you do that you always see, like the B-roll going behind as the cast talks about their experiences. They asked me, like, would I be okay if my family wasn't noble? And I was like, well, of course. I just hope that my family did good things and were good to other people, and that they're people I could be proud of. And Sometimes be careful what you wish for. If you watch all 10 seasons of this show, now 11 seasons, it's really interesting the history that people learn of what they thought happened in their family. Like there was one woman who she thought her family was royal and they went to a palace, and it turns out her uh, great 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 grandfather was royal in a sense. He was the king of thieves and had lived in the dungeon. So you just have to be prepared for whatever the story is. So they had me walk up and down a very rickety platform to go into the barn, and I opened my little coffer. I even had a key to unlock it to read the letter about my family, and thinking, well, I'm going to learn that they were farmers, clearly, because I'm in a dairy farm. But I did see this kind of manor home off to the distance, but they said, oh, no, that's, just ignore that. So here I get the letter. So this is the letter that you can see. I won't read the whole thing to you, but if you watch the show, you can hear me reading it. But it turns out that my family is one of the oldest, most noble families, the Howland Prince family, and my four times great great grandfather built Herstader Manor in the 1820s. So my family is one of the oldest that they've found that's been on the show. My family went all the way back. They went 9 generations to my ninth great grandfather, but they could have gone even further. And then Nikki, who was on the show, she is the oldest person they've ever, or her family was the oldest they've ever found on the show. Her family goes back from time immemorial to Scotland, which is pretty incredible for her to experience Scotland. But yeah, so my family were a bunch of knights who did heroic deeds and saved towns and had great romances. And often the immigrant story can be a very tragic one. You'll see a lot of people who read the stories, they lost loved ones, they lost babies, husbands perished in the Baltic Sea fishing. Uh, my family had these like fairy tale romances, which was pretty incredible. And Hairstead Manor, that is still standing, which I'll show you some pictures. So my covert was filled with pictures from my family going 9 generations back because they were so noble. This is such a privileged thing. They had oil paintings done and drawings. And so I have a picture of my 9 times great grandfather who was responsible in helping change the course of Swedish religious history, interestingly enough. So there's Herstader Manor, built in the Jane Austen Regency era, and it belongs to the state now. It's considered such an important historic home. And the farmers who rent there now, who have a dairy farm, and they are not related to me, but they are wonderful caretakers of the home and were just went out of their way to help me feel welcome. And they have this award-winning Swedish cheesecake, and they gave that to me because it was my birthday while I was there, and they let me tour the home, and it was really special to go in. I got to do this last, and they had me go into the great room, and there was a book on the table, and I opened the book, and it turns out it was a book by my great great uncle Steno Hallenkreutz, and he wrote a book about Italy in Latin. And this was, I think, one of the coolest things to learn. He was a Swedish intellectual and also a librarian. So I have not only noble blood, I come from a long line of librarians in my family, which I can't believe they found the book and they let me keep it. So really incredible. This is our coat of arms, which I think is just incredible to be able to have this. And then this is a lot of portrait of my family. Going back all the way in the top right is my 9 times great grandfather, and then 5 times and 4 times and 3 times great grandfather and grandmothers, all the way to Carl Johansson Johnson and Augusta Johnson, my great great grandmother. I thought she had gotten married and immigrated to America, but it turns out she was an adventuress and came to America. And as the letter said, she met another type of blue blood. She met a Swedish New York police officer, Carl Johnson, and that's who she married. And this is my great grandmother in the bottom left Cigna. My mom remembers meeting her. I wasn't able to meet her, but she said it was like entertaining in the court of a queen. And remember, she had an apartment in the Waldorf Astoria, so they were very much New York socialites. So how incredible to have these photographs of my family, of my great great grandparents, and these stories. Another really special thing that the show does is they have an artist who draws a family tree all the way to me. So this is just a priceless gift. So I'm very much a connector, and after I got back from America, kept in touch with all the cast. And when the show aired in January of 2022, we had a Zoom cast reunion, and we all got together and got to share stories, which is really wonderful after having this just life-changing, unbelievable experience. And then right before the last episode, all the ladies got together and we had a reunion, which is special. And because there's now been 11 seasons, just a couple months ago, we did a cast reunion on Zoom with all 11 casts, and I think about 20 to 30 people showed up, and it's pretty wonderful to share the experiences and what we've learned about our family and how we all can continue to connect with our family or how we've come back to Sweden. Uh, so this is just such a fun librarian author meet cute story. So one of the cast members is Sally Franson, and when we met before the show started filming, we got to talking about what we did, and I told her I was a librarian, and she said how much she loved librarians, and she said she was an author, and I said how much I loved authors, and I asked her what her book was. So Ladies Guide to Selling Out, we have this as a library book club kit at the library. So she told me about the book, and I thought it sounded really familiar. And remember, we had to give up our phones, so I had gotten a Kindle Paperwhite, and I loaded it with a bunch of library books so that I wouldn't be without a book, trying to travel light, could have been in Sweden for 6 weeks. Well, that night I went back and looked on my Kindle, and sure enough, I had checked out Sally's book. So again, like what a small world. So when I got back, Sally did a Zoom talk for the library, which was really well attended, and she came to some of our book clubs via Zoom. She's based out of Minneapolis. She's a teacher as well at a college, and she teaches classes on delight. She's just wonderful. And I think we were all hoping that Sally, being an author, and this book has been optioned to become a Netflix film by Meg Ryan. So watch for it on Netflix soon. It's really fun. And Sally just announced a couple weeks ago that her sophomore novel is coming out big in Sweden about our Great Swedish Adventure, a novelized form. So that'll be out this summer. So look for that. Again, it's fun to talk about being minor celebrities in Sweden. So I think the title is perfect. I've been able to see a lot of the cast since I came back. So got to see Brett. He used to live in Washington, so he came all the way up to Port Townsend to see the library. I've seen Sharon many times, who's become a very dear friend. And then this is Bubba. He came up to Paulsbo once. So just wonderful that they say this show is the gift that keeps on giving. So you go to Sweden, you have that incredible experience, but then it's all these wonderful connections that happen after the show that I think is just as special. And then this summer, my cousin Lotta, who I got to meet for 2 minutes, who we've been in touch on social media since the show aired, took a huge chance and invited me and my husband James, that you can see in this picture, to celebrate midsummer at her family's summer stugan, a little island outside of Stockholm. And I had dreamed of going to midsummer ever since I was a little girl. My husband and I actually got married on midsummer a couple years before. That's how special the holiday is for me, and we couldn't have had a more incredible time. And even though I was the first person off this show, my Swedish family really talked about how I was the winner, because there I was, like, for a long weekend celebrating midsummer with my Swedish family and their friends, and it couldn't have been more magical. So this is a picture of my husband James helping raise the Danish dog that we got to dance around and sing, and just incredible. And seeing that other picture of us, I think, was taken at like midnight, which is pretty incredible to be in the land of the midnight sun for midsummer. So that's me and my cousin Lotta and her daughter Maria, who's just getting ready to have a baby, and our wonderful crowns that we made for midsummer and more midsummer celebrations. A lot of people were musicians, so there was live music at the celebration. I mean, summers are sacred for a reason. The winters are very hard. I haven't experienced a Swedish winter yet, but I have to say, like, this was one of the greatest weekends of my life going back to Sweden, and I'm so grateful to have my Swedish family now. So I hope someday that we can return the favor and show them our incredible Olympics here. I also got to meet more family, and one of my cousins is a musician and had this special concert in front of the Stockholm Concert Hall with the EU. So that was really special that that happened while we were in Sweden. And then I got back together with Pastor Amos and his family. We went on a lovely boat trip, and I got to introduce them to my family, and they have become family. So really special that we could all be together. And again, I hope they come to visit America one of these days. Just a couple of months ago, before the latest season, season 11, came out, they did an article to see where we are now, and most of the cast 10 had been back to Sweden and connected with their family. So here's an article about me and my cousin Lotta celebrating midsummer. So this is a QR code that you can scan with your phones to watch all 10 seasons, and I believe Keith is going to put it in the chat as well so you can get the link. And that's it. So tack there maquette, that means thank you very much in Swedish. I'm going to open it up to questions and answers. So we'll stop recording, and I'll stop sharing my screen so I can take questions. And thank you so